So with acrylic painting, one of the most common techniques students use is mixing up the paints into a solid color and then painting in whatever they see as far as background goes, as far as the apple goes. But if you look at the photograph, and this is the apple that we did before, if you look, there's a lot of different colors happening in different places at the same time. Common mistake students can make when they're painting is they try to do everything in sections, right? They're going to do the background section, they're going to do the ground section, and then they have to try to paint around certain things. That works in some instances, but generally what happens is, if I was going to traditionally paint how, you might think to paint, right? I'll take my yellow, and I have a pale yellow background, so I'm going to make a tint of yellow, all right? And I'm going to mix up that tint of yellow to get that background color, and I'm going to paint that background in going across, and then when I get to the apple, obviously I have to carefully go around it, right, and try to get everything blended together. I don't paint clean, so I paint inside the apple. Sometimes, that can tell areas. This is a very simple, background subject matter and object subject matter. So doing this can actually take longer and make it harder to then try to paint in what I'm trying to paint in around the shadows, because all the way over here is already dry. So I can't blend that anymore. I can't move anything. I can't move any paint around unless I paint over top of it, which is what I'm doing. I'm painting over top of that to get that background tone in. So let's try to steer clear of that, and let's use a technique that is more common. Instead of painting like paint by numbers where you're painting in shapes, let's start with a base wash. So what I'm going to do is, I can see in my photograph I've got a nice pale background and I've got yellows basically throughout. So similarly to what you did with watercolor, I'm going to take a pale yellow-white wash on my brush. So I've got some water now, and I'm mixing it with my acrylics to thin it out. And you can see I'm mostly in the white. I have a dot of yellow in here. And I'm going to take that yellow, pale yellow wash and paint it over the whole thing, locking in base areas of color, even over the apple, because if you look, my pencil marks where I drew with the H pencil, they show through. And the apple has some yellow. And as I layer this, even the good tabletop has a yellowish hint to it. I got a nice big brush and I got a good amount of water. Now, with this being a piece of mat board, it's paper, right? I don't want to have too much water on the surface of my mat board because it will start to pull away and peel up. So I'm not soaking it because we're not painting on canvas that is sealed, okay? But now that I have that background dry that quickly, it's almost dry that quickly. Now if I start putting in some of the colors that I need and have in my apple, obviously I got to clean my brush. I'm going to do the same thing inside the apple. I'm going to block in areas of color with a pale wash. So I've got some yellows, I've got some greens, I've got some reds, and I'm going to block them in with a round brush, a little bit of water, and I need some yellow and I need some green. So I'm just going to kind of mix up. Remember, we add the dark to the light. And I'll get some water and get a nice pale wash in there. So I've got this pale yellow green over here, all through this area. Got some in here. But you notice what's happening is I'm blocking color in, but it's not opaque, which is okay, because when it dries, I'll be able to layer on top of it similarly to what I did with the dry overlap technique. Now I'm looking at it and I can see that there's a little bit. Now I'm looking at it and I can right in here, but more of a yellowish hint, some white. So I'll kind of tint that a little bit with some white. You can see how it's getting a little bit brighter. And I do have that color all the way through down along here, because even though there's some hints of that yellow and yellow-green showing through. So I'm just blocking in these areas of color. There's more of a yellow underneath here, So blocking in color is going to help now I just got to give it a minute to dry. Now I'm not going to paint the ground down here, the wood grain yet. I could grain a tan wash, but I don't want to mess with the cast shadow. This is already done. That's all I need to do for the base layer. Obviously I want to brighten that up using a more opaque version of the white. So while this is drying, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to start just putting in of the white. So I might need a little bit more white. I already have the yellow tint there. The yellow tint, when I go back into it with the white, the viscosity, the thickness of it is a little bit thinner than some of the other acrylics. So now when I go in, what you're going to see is, as I paint across, I can grab some of that yellow. And this is where acrylic, can be really fun, because in that, you see what I did? I went in with the white, but I also have some yellow on the brush. And that's what gives me that cool texture. And if I hit inside the green apple, it's okay. You know, if I hit some white in there, I can always cover that later with other paint. So I'm not worrying about trying to get around that apple perfectly. And I can still see my stem through it. I can still see the edge of the apple. All right, so I'm getting that nice horizontal movement. I'm getting a nice bright yellowish white background. The brush strokes I'm not blending away completely. All right, the brush strokes are visible. They can be short, they can be long, they can be varied. And I just established a nice background tone, although I think I need it to be brighter over here. So I just put some more white on top, and I create that mixed version, and I create the pale yellow that I'm trying to accomplish there. Alright, so that gives me a thick, slightly thicker, no longer washed background. And now I can start working on it. And now so as I continue with this area now being dry, I'm going to start in on the apple. And again, when you did the dry overlap technique in watercolor, you're kind of doing the same in acrylic technique, in that you're still following the contour edge colors as needed. So obviously yellow is my base here for my apple. I'm going to need some of that green. So I got my blue, but I'm not going to mix up a ton of green. I'm just going to mix up a nice yellow green and kind of have those colors near one another. All right, and you notice I'm not trying to get it all mixed into the same color. Look at that nice pale yellow green, and there's some red over here. So as I put this in, you'll notice that on the brush, it's kind of creating different brush strokes. Maybe I need a little bit more white right here because there's kind of a a light tint. So we're going right in. I didn't clean my brush. I'm going right in with the white, and I'm softening these areas around the other colors. And I need a little bit more yellow, and a little bit more yellow and white. So I just go right in with the yellow and white. And you can see the mixtures are not solid. There's visible brush strokes. I've got a nice yellowish, greenish, white tone over here. And of course, I'm still blocking in. Like, I haven't started the finished part of my apple, and I'm building it slowly. I'm building slowly the colors where and how I want them. So now I've got some reds up here. When I mix the reds with what I have, you can see it kind of gives me that peach color, right? I kind of have this orange. It kind of gives me that reddish gives me that reddish hint that when I go in, it's kind of that pink base. All right, that could be a good base. I still need to get darker. Obviously, I still need to get darker, and I still need to kind of mix, create that red and yellow to kind of create that varied tone in there. And you notice too, my brush strokes are there. Following brush strokes are always the contour of the apple. And again, I still have multiple colors on the bristles of my brush. On the bristles of my brush. This little glazed area where it's like a transparent version of orange. So again, I'm still not on my finish. So again, I'm still not on color red. I'm still in my base layers. I'm still in my base layers. Acrylics is about building layers upon layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. Now, I'm definitely going to need to clean my brush as I get into, you know, some more of the red colors that I need in there. Red colors that I need in there. And shade with the complement. So I want to shade with green. All right, so I've got my red. This is a pure bright red. I want to mute it a little bit with the green, so I'm going to need a little bit of yellow and blue. So you can see I have that tiny bit of blue over here, and I'm making that shade, and I'm making that shade of red. And now I want to come back to my pure red. The softness, the soft edge here, I'll deal with later. I made up a little bit of a reddish brown just by using some of the, and I didn't clean my brush. I still have that same color palette on the brush as I follow along. So that soft edge right there, you can see what I have on the brush. I'm just softening that edge with more of a dry brush. This gets a little bit lighter in here. So I'm just grabbing that color and just layering it on top. that color back there has a little bit of that glazed, kind of a reddish highlight with some white. So that's how I'm kind of putting that in. I put that little bit down and it was a dry brush. Now I'm putting that white over top where it's reflecting from the light source. The light source. Smaller brush when I get into some of those reds back there, but I'm putting those in along the back there where those need to be. So now that I have that brown, I'm putting in some more blue and red to make that more like a prismatic black. And I'm putting in that shaded area of the apple. Again, I still have all those original colors there on my brush. So I didn't use black, I used more of a prismatic black to help develop the shades, and I'm just softening it out. Softening it out of the bottom. There's a little bit of that happening here. A little bit of it over here. It's almost too much. I gotta get back to some green over there. So I can use a little bit of water on the brush, and so I have that red blending down over here. So I did use a little bit of water, and you know, now I need to do my stem. My stem has a brownish, greenish tint to it, so I'm just getting a little bit of that brown that I made using the red and the green and the yellow. So I just got a small brush and I just mixed up some chromatic brown. So it's not straight orange. And just tightening up that stem shape a little bit. But I have a good amount of paint on the brush now, and I'm just trying to get that sharpness while maintaining the highlights on the top of that stem. And then I've got that at the front edge of the surface plane apple, which I still have right there. So now that my apple, I need a little bit of water here, my apple stem is done, just kind of clean that up a little bit. I've got to work on the background. So obviously now I mixed up that brown right here, but I want to mix up a nice medium brown because I can tell that this ground is light. So I'm just going to clean all my brushes, and then I'm going to mix up a good amount of that brown, and I'm going to put that bottom surface plane in. To make that good brown, I'm going to make a nice orange. And obviously, I need some more of that yellow, orange, to get a nice orange. If I take some of that blue in there, that gets me into a violet, but it's also starting to give me some brown. So I'm going to throw a little bit of white in there, and again I need more yellow. There we go. Getting into that nice brown that I want. But it needs to be a little bit warmer. So I'm going to need a good amount of that yellow back in there. Now, is there brown? Yes. I want to try to make brown, and I want to lighten it up. So now I've got a good brown. Now I'm adding white. And this is going to give me the ground a little bit more yellow. So when I put that wood grain in, exact brown, but I'm going to make it the color that I wanted to help create contrast. All right. So to get up against the edge of the apple, right, use the square brush. I can clean up any edges that got a little bit funky when I did the apple, but I don't want that circular brush stroke. I just come right up against the edge of it and pull it away from the apple. Still have the cast shadow to worry about. Shadow in, I can just shade this color now with a little bit of violet. And as the cast shadow goes across, now with all of that base wash being done, obviously there's things that I need to tighten up, like the shape of the edge of the apple here, right? But it's dry now. Here, right? But it's dry now, so I get to use a smaller brush, you know, and I can get in here and I can tighten up some of that yellow green along the edge of the apple right here. You can see because it goes right over that darker color. Maybe a touch of water on the edge of the brush just to get a nice clean edge. And then of course, you know, just come back in with the other colors. Make it work. And that's my acrylic apple.